All right, this is about the 7th take, so hopefully this is the last take. Hey kids, and welcome to the show. Today we're talking about Twitter and what Bloomberg has just put out a couple days ago. It was 2 days ago. They did an article in Bloomberg Opinion that talked about the rise in inflation and how you need to be aware and stay away. So what they said was if you make less than $300,000 a year, yes, that's less than $300,000 a year, you should start taking some precautions. And so here's the first 4 they listed on their Twitter. Take the bus. So if you live wherever you live, you need to stop driving and take the bus. That's not an option for me. It might be for you. Probably not. Don't buy in bulk. Try lentils instead of meat. And then they said nobody said this was going to be fun. You open the article and it starts talking about allowing your pets to die. Don't give them cancer treatments and stuff because you can't afford it. And that is true. You can't afford it. And the reason you can't afford it is because inflation has skyrocketed. And now with a bunch of other things that are happening around the world, you're going to start to see things really go south quickly. And I am not black-pilled. I am more of a white pill kind of person, and I think there's hope, especially if you've been watching my videos over the last couple years, because this is like the 153rd video I'll be uploading, and I'm still kind of talking about the same thing. Around the bend, we're seeing inflation. We're seeing these things happen. We see the mass printing of money. We see this huge transfer of wealth. We see war starting back up again. War, oil, all these things lead to inflation, and eventually they will lead to hyperinflation. And what that means is things will just be, our dollar will start to be worth less. Now, the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, if you ever see that in articles, that's what it stands for, is making a deal with China to use the Chinese yuan, I mispronounced that, but basically the Chinese dollar, to buy oil right now. The oil dollar is the US dollar. We lose the trade on oil around the world, and we are going to be in a bind because we are going to no longer be able to export our dollar. And when we can't export our dollar, because outside of Hollywood, we don't make a whole lot in the United States anymore, we are going to be in trouble. So they're telling you to not buy in bulk. And that is only half true. You see, the people that make $300,000 a year or more spend less of their money for their food, which means, if they're spending 1% or less than 1% of their food and you are spending 15% of your income for food, it's going to hit you harder. And that's what this article is all about. But it is, when you talk about this stuff, you kind of have to be brutally honest. Nobody said that this was going to be fun. No, they didn't, because for the last year I've been telling you that it's going to suck. It's going to suck really bad. And now we're seeing this. You go to the store and you see your cart of groceries, and you don't see it right away because not everything is just higher. Everything's just a little higher. It's pennies. So if you go in there and you see, okay, well, apples look about the same price. They were 89 cents last week. They're just 91 cents this week. And, that's by the pound. So those 2 cents, they add up. And that's the way inflation hits us early on. Well, the problem is early on happened a couple months ago. So now we're mid-stage inflation where we're going to start to see the prices rise even more. And now with the gas prices increasing, because you haven't seen the prices in the stores reflect the recent gas hikes, because it takes time before those companies start charging their distributors. So we're going to see prices continue to go up. And people are still kind of just waiting for the government to come back and help them. And it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen this time, guys. They prepared you to wait for the government to scoop in and save you, and now they're not, because they got your vote. That's what they wanted. So now what are you going to do if you are stuck in a situation of how am I going to feed my family? All of a sudden, I can't even afford to drive to to the store to buy food. So all of a sudden it costs you more to drive to the grocery store. Let's talk about we're rural people. We don't go to town very often. We do, not very often. But if we went to town every day, man, would our gas prices just destroyed us. If all of a sudden we went from, it seriously went from $40 to fill up the tank to $75 overnight. So could we have handled that if we lived in the city? Maybe, if we had public transit. Unfortunately, our public transit in Oklahoma City isn't great. You can ride on it for 4 hours to get where you're going. I mean, it's getting a little better, but it's not perfect, and it's not available to people that live out of the cities. So if you guys want to know one of the big business ideas that's coming up, I'm not going to do it, but start doing these little parking lots outside of the city and giving people shuttles into the city so they can get to public transit. That's the future, guys. If you live in small towns outside of the city and you have a lot of people that work in the city, get yourself some electric cars and start doing some cool Ubering. That's gonna be the next step. Uber with electric cars. If you want to invest, do that. I'm not doing that. I'm going to invest in my family, in my four walls, because lumber is going to continue to go up. So is cryptocurrency. So we're going to fight that. So they talk about this article, and they talk about how much the average American is using. And unfortunately, the average American is, I think they're using a lot more than 15%. They're saying 5%. They're saying a person with that makes $19,000 a year is only using 4% of their income for food. That's what, according to that article. And that is off. And maybe I misread it. I'll have to read it again. But I promise you, someone that's making $19,000 a year is using much more than 4% of their income for food. The danger zone is 30%. So do your math, do your budget. You should be budgeting every month anyway. So do your math, do your budget. How much are you spending on food? So if it's more than 30% of your take-home pay, you are in crisis. It needs to be around 10 or 15% at the most. And you should be eating really well. So what kind of things do you need to buy? If you're not supposed to be buying in bulk, what are you supposed to do? Well, like I said, that was a half-true statement. No, you shouldn't be buying eggs in bulk. They're going to spoil. You shouldn't be buying milk in bulk. It's going to spoil. You shouldn't be buying tater tots and French fries in bulk. Not because they're going to spoil, because we get the frozen ones. Let's just assume your freezer is going to work throughout World War III. So you start packing that with French fries and tater tots and stuff. Well, you're missing out on areas that you can pack protein. You can, people say, I can't can. Well, guess what? You can freeze. Anybody can freeze. You can take fresh fruit, cut it up, stick it in a Ziploc bag, stick it in the freezer, put a label on it. You can do that. So even though you can't can, if you don't have the jars and stuff, there are ways that you can preserve healthy foods. So if you buy a bunch of veggies and all of a sudden, oh man, we didn't eat all that, it's going to go bad. Before it goes bad, freeze it. You can freeze your own food. Yeah, it's easy. Our grandparents back in the 20s, during the Depression, they didn't have the freezers that we have today. They had to learn to can. So we're going to learn how to can, because we are about to plant our crops for this year, and we're going to harvest in the fall, and we're going to can. So we're going to learn how to do traditional canning. We're going to do some freezing stuff. So what do you put in your freezer? You put nutritious stuff. You put beef. You put chicken. You put pork. You put those things that are going to make big meals with what you're buying in bulk. What are you buying in bulk? You're buying rice. You're buying pasta. You're buying lentils. Like they said, try lentils instead of beef. Because you shouldn't eat beef every day. You shouldn't eat pork every day. I mean, I'm on a particular diet, so I eat a lot more protein than I eat anything else. I can't eat a lot of carbs, so I eat a lot of meat. Most people, or a lot of people, can't. So how do you afford it? Well, here's a couple tricks. Number one, go find a butcher, like a real butcher, and just buy as much as you can. You can go and buy it on sale, wrap it up, put it in a freezer. You can do those things. Or you can buy it from a company that's local, a local farmer. You can go in there and shake their hands and say, hey, I can't afford to buy a big old cow, but I can commit to buying some stuff from you. Maybe you can work out a deal. Because now bartering and working out deals with the individual owners of businesses is going to be more important than ever. You have to start setting stuff aside. Make sure that rice or those beans, those kind of things are on your store shelves. Make sure your stored shelves, not your store shelves. Don't go to the store. Your store shelves, which should be in your pantry. If you don't have a pantry, make a pantry. It's a closet. Put food in it. Make sure it stays dry. Also, make sure that if you're storing like pastas and grains and stuff, that you put them in plastic, smell-proof containers to keep rodents from finding their way out of the woods near your home and into those stores, because that's where they're going to go first, wouldn't you? So make sure you're storing that properly, and then start to think about what you're going to be eating over the next few years. Start to put a few things away that can last a long time, but start cooking healthy, because once you start cooking healthy, you don't have to go to the fast food places, and your food cost will come way down. Everybody says it's cheaper to go to McDonald's. That's a poor person's attitude, and I'll tell you why. Because yes, if I am super hungry, I can't walk into a store and buy all the ingredients for a hamburger and French fry and a soda. If I buy all those ingredients, it's going to cost me $30 or $40. And I'm just guessing. I haven't bought that stuff in a long time. So if I buy all the ingredients for a hamburger, the lettuce, the pickles, the onions, the tomatoes, the beef, the cheese, the bread, that's going to be a very expensive grocery trip. Or I can just go to McDonald's and I can just buy a Happy Meal and get French fries, a drink, and all that stuff for like $3. So there you go. It's cheaper, right, to go to McDonald's? Well, it's not, and I'm going to tell you why. It's only cheaper because we waste. And by that, I mean, we won't go and say, well, I'm a single person, because that's usually who wastes the most food. So I'm not going to say, because married, it's easy. You buy some hamburgers, you make a bunch of burgers, you make 5 or 6 burgers. It's cheaper than McDonald's. It's not cheaper if you do one burger, unless you do this. You go and you make your patties and freeze the ones that you're not using. And you make sure that you do that stuff and put those things away. And over the course of the month, you can have a few burgers throughout the month. Your veggies, you're just supplementing your lettuces and your spinaches. I suggest you take spinach and learn how to use spinach or some other nice green leafy, like healthy green, to put on your sandwiches. Moving forward, if you can get it, you can grow it. It's really easy to grow. The reason you want to use spinach and not lettuce, especially iceberg lettuce, is because of nutrients, protein. Your nutrition is important. Everything you eat from now on, you need to start thinking nutrition, because when it gets to the point where all you can eat is what you have at home, if all you have in your freezer are French fries and all you have on your shelf are potato chips and sodas, well, you're going to be in a bad way if you can't go to the grocery store and buy stuff. But if you've gotten yourself a little garden outside, you get some leafy greens, and you've got some meat stored in your freezer, you've got some good, even macaroni and cheese up on the shelf, that's pasta. Those kind of things will sustain you, and then you can spend money on special things. And that's the second part of this. It's not that you can't do any of this stuff anymore in an environment where the economy is crashing. It's you have to tighten your belt a little bit. So if you want to go to a movie, go to a movie. But don't go to all the movies. Before the pandemic happened, we were a society that went to the theater to watch every movie that came out. And we watched it in 3D, and we watched it in the D-Box, and all these crazy things. And during the pandemic, we've gotten to be more of a society that watches streaming services. It's still exciting to go to the theater every now and then, but it's become more of a date. It's become more of an adventure. So we may see where people are dressing up to go to the theaters more. And that's okay, because those things, those entertainments are supposed to be treats. They're not the rules. We tell our kids, you can't have ice cream every night. You don't deserve it. You can have ice cream occasionally, because a gallon of ice cream should last a family of 5 an entire month. It shouldn't last a family of 5 one serving. That's where you're going to need to reprogram yourself, because you have been programmed to waste. You buy something, it breaks, you throw it away because you can't fix it. So start thinking about things you can fix. Start thinking about the things that you have control over, because what you don't have control over is what's happening in other countries and in other parts of the world. What you do have control over is what's happening in your own home. So look in your freezer, look in your cupboards, make sure the things that are in there are healthy for your family. If they're not, pull those out. Eat them. Have a celebration. Do one of those things. But make sure all the food that starts coming into your house is going to be healthier. That's not to say you can't have treats. Just make sure it's healthy. Because, again, if you eat McDonald's or Burger King or any of those fast food places every day, and you drink the sodas and you do all the high fructose corn syrups and all that stuff, you are going to be less healthy. You're going to be more lethargic. You're not going to want to go out and do stuff. You're going to become depressed, and depressed people make less they don't make as good choices. They make poor choices because they're depressed and they just want to feel good for that second. And it's harder to look to the future when you are depressed. So step back, guys, and realize that yes, there are some hard times coming down the road, but this has happened before. And not only has it happened before, but the families, our grandparents, didn't have half of the resources that we have. They didn't have the access to the information that we have. They don't have access to grocery stores right now like we have. They didn't have Amazon like we have. We have a lot of opportunities. But are you spending your time trying to catch up on the latest movie or the latest whatever? Are you looking at pop culture, or are you looking at trying to create an environment that you can thrive in? Do you know every movie that's out on TV, but haven't learned a single skill in the last 3 years? Well, that's where you need to step back and say, well, you know what? What do I provide in this scenario where the world is going to flip upside down? Can you barter? Do you have a skill that someone's going to want for some bread? Because it doesn't matter what you do. If your job is talking into a YouTube camera or a camera and uploading videos to YouTube, or being a content creator, guess what? People aren't going to pay for this when they need to pay for food. And that's okay. I'm going to hopefully continue to make content. But this is one of the first things that needs to go. Your subscriptions. If you can't afford them, just do without them. We went 2 years without reliable internet out here in rural Oklahoma. And it might be the reason why we were so grounded going into the pandemic and coming out of it, because we were not exposed to all the propaganda from both sides that everybody else was on a constant basis. We were exposed, but not constantly, because we could not be plugged in. Now we're plugged in, and I'm starting to see that we are getting exposed to a lot of propaganda, and it's stressing me out. So I want you guys to understand, when you look at that little screen, there is somebody that wants you to see what's on that screen, and they are brainwashing you. Simple as that. So keep in mind what you're watching all day. Take a journal, write, or just go look at your history. Start watching what you're consuming. How much of it is learning something? How much of it is just wasting time because you don't want to deal with the world? When you get to the point where you just don't want to deal with the world anymore, guess what that leads to? That leads to plugging in even more. That means to putting the virtual reality goggles on. That means going into the metaverse. And I'm going to do a show just about the metaverse, but it scares me that, or it saddens me. It doesn't scare me. It saddens me that there's people in this world that I consider great friends and good people, that because of the things that are going on in the world, they are considering plugging themselves in and just being a part of the matrix. It seems pretty easy to plug yourself in. You know, it's almost suicidal. It's an end to something. That's how I perceive it. You're ending this life and moving on to another. It's going to be, my generation's going to have to keep 1 foot in and 1 foot out. That's the way we're going to live. And in our next generation and our grandkids, they may be plugged in by choice. Or they may be forced to be plugged in if they are part of that group of people living in the pods and eating the bugs. Google that. Eat the pods and eat the bugs. Live in the pods and eat the bugs. Let's not do that. Let's build something special. And let's start by making sure in the next few weeks and the next few months you're making decisions that, if you're dead wrong, are still going to benefit your family. And if you are right, you are going to have advantages over everyone around you. If you ask me, that's a win-win. Everything has to be done out of love. Don't manipulate people. Just get out there and work hard, be kind, and have fun.